Sarah Mitchell drove slowly through the gates of Willowbrook Estates for the first time. The security guard smiled and waved as she showed her new resident card. Behind her, her 16-year-old daughter Emma sat in the passenger seat, looking out at the neat rows of houses with their perfect lawns and matching mailboxes. "This place looks like a movie set," Emma said, pressing her face to the window. "Everything is so the same," Sarah laughed softly. "It's supposed to be nice. We both need a fresh start after everything that happened back home." The moving truck was already parked in front of their new house at 1247 Maple Drive. Sarah had chosen this house because it was bigger than their old one, and the school district was excellent. After 22 years in law enforcement, she had finally made it to police chief. The job came with a good salary and benefits enough to afford this upscale neighborhood. As they pulled into their driveway, Emma noticed the small sign planted in the front yard. "What's an HOA?" she asked. "Homeowners Association," Sarah explained, turning off the engine. "It's like a group that makes rules for the neighborhood. They keep everything looking nice and handle things like snow removal and landscaping in common areas." Emma read the sign out loud. "Willowbrook Estates HOA welcomes you. Please review all community guidelines within 48 hours of move-in. Violations subject to fines." She wrinkled her nose. "Sounds fun." The movers were already unloading boxes when Sarah and Emma got out of the car. The house was a 2-story colonial with white siding and black shutters, just like most of the other houses on the street. The lawn was green and recently cut, and there were small flower beds on either side of the front steps. "It's nice, Mom," Emma said, trying to sound enthusiastic. She knew her mother had worked hard for this promotion and the chance to start over in a new city. After her father had left 3 years ago, things had been tough. Sarah had thrown herself into her work, climbing the ranks in their small hometown police department. But small-town politics and her ex-husband's connections had made things difficult. This new job as chief of police in a bigger city was exactly what she needed. Sarah grabbed a box labeled Emma's room and headed toward the front door. "I know it's different from home," she said, "but I think we'll be happy here." The inside of the house was spacious and bright. There was a big living room with a fireplace, a kitchen with granite counters, and a dining room that Sarah knew they would probably never use. Upstairs, Emma's bedroom was twice the size of her old one, with its own bathroom and a window that looked out over the backyard. "I guess I can't complain," Emma said, setting down her backpack on the bed. She was trying to be positive, but everything felt so different from their old house. Their old neighborhood had character. Houses were different colors, and people had gardens with vegetables and flowers that didn't match. Some lawns were perfect, and others had dandelions. It felt real. As they worked to unpack, neighbors started stopping by to introduce themselves. First was Mrs. Chen from next door, who brought homemade cookies and seemed genuinely friendly. Then came the Johnsons from across the street with their twin boys who looked about Emma's age. "Everyone seems nice," Sarah said as she unpacked dishes in the kitchen. Around lunchtime, there was another knock on the door. Sarah opened it to find a woman in her early 60s with perfectly styled gray hair and a clipboard in her hands. She wore a bright pink blazer and had the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hello there," the woman said in a sweet voice that sounded practiced. "You must be our new neighbor. I'm Margaret Thornton, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm the president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association." "Nice to meet you," Sarah said, wiping her dusty hands on her jeans. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, and this is my daughter Emma." Emma appeared behind her mother wearing an old band t-shirt and jeans with holes in the knees. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she had paint under her fingernails from helping to pack their art supplies. Maggie's smile got a little tighter as she looked Emma up and down. "How lovely," she said in a way that didn't sound lovely at all. "I just wanted to stop by and welcome you to our community. I have a welcome packet here with all of our rules and regulations." She handed Sarah a thick folder stuffed with papers. "I always like to go over the most important points with new residents. We work very hard to maintain our property values here, and that means everyone needs to follow the guidelines." Sarah flipped through the folder. There were rules about lawn height, approved paint colors, where garbage cans could be placed, what kinds of decorations were allowed, and dozens of other regulations she had never thought about. "This is comprehensive," Sarah said. "Oh yes," Maggie said proudly. "I've been president for 8 years now, and I've really improved our standards. When I moved here, people were doing whatever they wanted. Pink houses, garden gnomes, cars parked on the street overnight. It was chaos. Emma made a small noise that sounded like she was trying not to laugh. Maggie's sharp eyes moved to her immediately. Young lady, I hope you understand that these rules apply to everyone in the household. We've had problems with teenagers who think the rules don't apply to them. I'm sure Emma will be fine, Sarah said quickly, sensing the tension. We're both excited to be part of the community. Wonderful, Maggie said, but she was still looking at Emma with suspicion. I should mention that we don't allow bicycles, skateboards, or other recreational equipment to be left in driveways or front yards overnight. Storage should be in garages or backyards only. Emma nodded politely, but Sarah could tell she was annoyed. Her daughter had always been independent and didn't like being talked down to, especially by strangers. Also, Maggie continued, we have quiet hours from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. on weekdays and 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. on weekends. Music, television, and outdoor activities should be kept to reasonable levels at all times. Of course, Sarah said. We're not party people. Good to hear. I also wanted to let you know that all exterior changes to homes must be approved by the HOA board before any work begins. This includes paint colors, landscaping, decorative items, and even things like doormats and porch furniture. Sarah was starting to feel overwhelmed. She had bought this house because it was in a nice neighborhood with good schools. She hadn't realized she was signing up for someone else to control how she could decorate her own home. I know it seems like a lot, Maggie said, apparently noticing Sarah's expression. But trust me, these rules protect all of our investments. I'm sure you paid good money for this house and you want it to hold its value, don't you? Of course, Sarah said. Excellent. I'll let you get back to unpacking. Oh, and there's a community meeting next Tuesday at 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. I encourage all residents to attend. We'll be discussing the upcoming holiday decoration guidelines. After Maggie left, Emma flopped down on one of the unpacked boxes in the living room. Well, she seems fun, she said sarcastically. Sarah sat down next to her. I know she's a little intense, but these places have rules for a reason. We just need to follow them and stay out of trouble. Did you see how she looked at me? Like I was going to spray paint the house or something. You were wearing a shirt with a skull on it, Sarah pointed out with a smile. It's a band shirt, and these jeans are designer jeans with intentional holes. I know, sweetheart, but maybe we should try to blend in, at least at first. This job is important to me and I don't want any drama with the neighbors. Emma sighed. Fine. But if she starts telling me I can't have friends over or listen to music, we're going to have problems. Sarah hoped it wouldn't come to that. She needed this fresh start to work out, after everything they had been through with the divorce and the stress of her old job. She just wanted a quiet place where she and Emma could build a new life together. But as she looked through the thick folder of HOA rules, she had a feeling that quiet might be harder to find than she had hoped. 3 days after moving in, Sarah found the first note stuck to her front door. It was typed on official HOA letterhead and signed by Margaret Thornton in blue ink. Dear resident of 1247 Maple Drive, the note began. It has come to our attention that a bicycle was left in your driveway overnight on August 15th. Per section 4.2 of the community guidelines, all recreational equipment must be stored in garages or backyards after sunset. Please ensure this violation does not occur again. Repeated violations may result in fines. Thank you for your cooperation in maintaining our community standards. Sarah stared at the note, feeling her blood pressure rise slightly. Emma's bike had been in the driveway for maybe 2 hours while they had dinner. She folded the paper and stuck it in her pocket, deciding not to mention it to Emma just yet. 2 days later, there was another note. This time, it was about a small ceramic garden gnome that Emma had placed next to their front steps. According to the note, lawn ornaments required prior approval from the HOA board, and gnomes were specifically listed as non-approved decorative items in the community standards. Emma found this note herself when she came home from her first day at Willowbrook High School. Are you kidding me? She said, waving the paper in the air as she walked into the kitchen where Sarah was making dinner. She has a problem with Mr. Whiskers? Mr. Whiskers was a 6-inch tall garden gnome that had been a joke gift from Emma's best friend back home. Emma had named him and treated him like a pet, moving him around their old yard and taking pictures of him in different poses. Maybe we should just put him in the backyard, Sarah suggested gently. Why? He's not hurting anyone. He's adorable. I know, but maybe it's not worth fighting about. Emma crossed her arms. Mom, you always taught me to stand up for what I believe in. Well, I believe in Mr. Whiskers' right to sit by our front door, Sarah couldn't help but smile. Emma had always been stubborn, a trait she had definitely inherited from her mother. Okay, but if we get more complaints, we might have to reconsider. The next morning, Sarah was getting ready for her second week at her new job when she heard Emma talking to someone outside. She looked out the window and saw her daughter standing in the driveway, still in her pajamas, talking to Maggie Thornton. Maggie was taking pictures of their house with her phone. Sarah quickly threw on a robe and stepped outside. "Good morning, Maggie," she said, trying to keep her voice friendly. "Is there a problem?" "Oh, hello, Sarah," Maggie said with that same fake smile. "I was just explaining to Emma about our parking regulations. Your car was parked crooked last night and it's blocking part of the sidewalk." Sarah looked at her car. It was maybe 6 inches over the perfectly straight line that the other cars formed, and it wasn't anywhere near the sidewalk. "I don't think it's blocking anything," she said. "Well, according to our guidelines, all vehicles must be parked in a straight line parallel to the curb. It's about maintaining the visual appeal of our neighborhood." Emma rolled her eyes so hard Sarah was surprised they didn't fall out of her head. "I'll make sure to park more carefully," Sarah said, though she was starting to feel frustrated. "Thank you. I also wanted to mention that I noticed you've been receiving a lot of deliveries. The UPS and FedEx trucks are quite noisy, and they're blocking traffic on our narrow streets." "We're still moving in," Emma said before Sarah could respond. "Of course we're getting deliveries. Where else are we supposed to get our stuff? Teleport it?" Maggie's smile disappeared completely. "Young lady, there's no need for sarcasm. I'm simply trying to help you understand how things work in our community. And I'm simply trying to understand why you care so much about where my mom parks her car." "Emma," Sarah said quietly, giving her daughter a warning look. "It's fine," Maggie said, though her voice had gotten colder. "I understand that some people need time to adjust to living in a quality neighborhood. I'm sure Emma will learn to appreciate our standards once she's been here longer." The way she said "some people" made Sarah's jaw tighten. She had spent her entire career dealing with difficult people, and she recognized condescension when she heard it. After Maggie left, Emma shook her head in disbelief. "Did she just imply that we're not good enough for this neighborhood?" "I think she's just very particular about the rules," Sarah said, though she had gotten the same feeling. "Mom, she was taking pictures of our house." "That's creepy." Sarah had to admit that Emma was right. There was something unsettling about the way Maggie was watching them so closely. Over the next week, things got worse. Sarah came home from work every day to find new notes about minor infractions. The garbage can was 2 feet too far from the curb. Emma's bedroom window was open, and music could be heard from the street during quiet hours, even though it was only 8:30 p.m. A small package from Amazon had been left on their doorstep for 3 hours, creating an untidy appearance. Emma started taking pictures of the notes and texting them to her friends back home. "You guys are not going to believe this," she would say, sharing screenshots of the increasingly ridiculous complaints. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon. Sarah was working in her home office, catching up on paperwork from her new job as police chief. She was still learning the department's procedures and getting to know her officers, so she often brought work home on weekends. Emma was in the backyard with her laptop, doing homework for her AP English class. She had spread out a blanket under the big oak tree and was enjoying the warm afternoon sun while she worked on an essay about civil rights. Around 3 p.m., there was a sharp knock on the front door. Sarah opened it to find Maggie standing there with her clipboard and an expression that suggested she had caught them committing a major crime. "Sarah, we need to talk," Maggie said without any greeting. "What's the problem now?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "The problem is that your daughter is being deliberately disrespectful and defiant. She's creating a hostile environment in our peaceful community." Sarah blinked in surprise. "What are you talking about?" "Emma is doing homework in our backyard. That's not what I'm referring to, and you know it. She's been making faces at me when I drive by, and yesterday she deliberately moved that gnome to a more visible location after I asked her to remove it. She moved her gnome from beside the steps to beside the mailbox. It's still on our property. It's an unapproved decoration, and she's flaunting our rules on purpose. Plus, I've seen her wearing inappropriate clothing when she walks to school. Those ripped jeans and band t-shirts are not suitable for a young lady in this neighborhood." Sarah felt her temper starting to rise. "Maggie, Emma is 16 years old. She can wear whatever clothes she wants as long as they're not inappropriate. And she's not breaking any actual laws by having a garden gnome in her own yard. These aren't laws, Sarah. They're community standards. Standards that everyone agreed to follow when they bought homes here. If Emma can't respect our rules, maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for your family. The threat was clear, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had dealt with bullies before, but this was different. This woman had some kind of official power in their neighborhood, and she was using it to harass them over completely trivial things. "I think you should leave now," Sarah said quietly. "I'm trying to help you," Maggie said, but her tone suggested otherwise. There are ways to make life very difficult for residents who don't cooperate. Fines, legal action, even forced sales in extreme cases. I would hate for things to go that far. After Maggie left, Sarah sat down in her living room and tried to process what had just happened. In her 22 years of law enforcement, she had encountered all kinds of people who abused small amounts of power. But this was her home, her sanctuary. She had moved here to get away from drama and politics, not to find herself dealing with a petty tyrant who seemed to have nothing better to do than harass a teenage girl over a garden gnome. Emma came inside a few minutes later and found her mother sitting quietly on the couch. "Was that the HOA lady again?" Emma asked. "Yeah. What did she want this time?" Sarah looked at her daughter, who was wearing ripped jeans and a vintage Nirvana t-shirt that had belonged to Sarah herself when she was younger. Emma's hair was in 2 braids and she had paint on her hands from an art project. She looked like exactly what she was, a normal, creative, intelligent teenager. "She thinks you're being disrespectful," Sarah said finally. Emma sat down next to her mother. "I haven't done anything wrong, Mom. I've been polite every time she's talked to me, even when she's been condescending and rude." "I know you have. Are you going to make me get rid of Mr. Whiskers?" Sarah looked out the window at the little gnome sitting cheerfully beside their mailbox. 3 weeks ago, she would have said yes. Keep the peace, follow the rules, don't make waves. But something about Maggie's threatening tone had changed her mind. "No," she said firmly. "Mr. Whiskers stays." Emma smiled and hugged her mother. "Thanks, Mom." As Sarah hugged her daughter back, she realized that this situation was going to get worse before it got better. But she also realized that she wasn't going to let someone bully her family, no matter what kind of clipboard they carried. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Sarah was getting ready for work when she heard the mail truck, followed immediately by a knock on the door. The postal worker handed her an official-looking envelope and asked her to sign for it. Inside was a formal notice from the Willowbrook Estates HOA board. The letter was 3 pages long and listed 17 different violations that had allegedly occurred over the past 2 weeks. Each violation had a potential fine attached, ranging from $50 to $200. Sarah read through the list in disbelief. Some of the complaints were so ridiculous she almost laughed, except that the threat of fines made it not funny at all. According to the letter, Emma had been seen walking too quickly through the neighborhood, which could be interpreted as running, which was prohibited on sidewalks during quiet hours. Their garden hose had been left partially uncoiled after Sarah watered the flower beds, creating an untidy appearance. Most absurd of all, their car had been parked in the exact same spot for more than 72 hours, which apparently violated a rule about preventing vehicle abandonment. "This is insane," Emma said when Sarah showed her the letter. "She's making stuff up now." "I don't think she's making it up," Sarah said grimly. "I think she's finding ways to interpret the rules that let her complain about anything she wants." Emma grabbed the thick folder of HOA guidelines from the kitchen counter and started flipping through it. "Listen to this," she said, reading aloud. Section 7.3. Residents should maintain a peaceful demeanor when using common areas and sidewalks. Excessive noise, hurried movement, or disruptive behavior is prohibited. She looked up at her mother. "What does hurried movement even mean? Am I supposed to walk in slow motion?" Sarah took the letter to work with her and showed it to Detective Mike Rodriguez, who had become her closest friend on the force. Mike had been with the department for 15 years and had helped Sarah learn the ins and outs of her new job. "This lady sounds like a piece of work," Mike said, after reading through the complaints. "But technically, if you signed an HOA agreement when you bought the house, you're legally bound to follow their rules. But some of these rules are so vague they could mean anything," Sarah protested. "That's probably intentional. Gives them more power to go after people they don't like." Mike handed the letter back to her. "My brother went through something similar when he moved to one of those fancy neighborhoods. The HOA president didn't like that he was a mechanic, so they started finding problems with everything he did. What happened? He fought it for 2 years and spent thousands of dollars on lawyers. Eventually, he just moved. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She couldn't afford to move again, especially not so soon after starting a new job. And more importantly, she didn't want to teach Emma that the right response to bullying was to run away. That afternoon, Sarah decided to attend the HOA meeting that Maggie had mentioned. She wanted to see how the organization actually worked, and maybe find some reasonable people who could help resolve the situation. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a nice building near the neighborhood small park. When Sarah arrived at 7 p.m., there were about 20 people sitting in folding chairs arranged in rows facing a table at the front of the room. Maggie sat at the center of the table with 2 other people Sarah didn't recognize. Maggie wore a navy blue business suit and had her hair pulled back severely. She looked like she was presiding over a corporate board meeting rather than a neighborhood discussion. "Welcome, everyone," Maggie said as the meeting began. "Tonight we'll be reviewing several important issues affecting our community standards." For the first 30 minutes, the board discussed mundane topics like snow removal contracts and the budget for landscaping common areas. Sarah was starting to think the meeting might be more reasonable than she expected. Then Maggie moved to what she called enforcement issues. "I want to address a concerning trend we've been seeing," Maggie said, looking directly at Sarah. "Some newer residents seem to believe that our community guidelines are suggestions rather than requirements. I want to make it clear that every resident agreed to follow these rules when they purchased their homes." Sarah felt her cheeks get hot as several people in the audience turned to look at her. "For example," Maggie continued, "we've had issues with unauthorized decorative items, improper parking, noise violations, and general disregard for the peaceful atmosphere we work so hard to maintain." An older man in the front row raised his hand. "Maggie, are you talking about specific incidents, or is this just a general reminder?" "I'm talking about documented violations, Harold. Multiple violations from the same household despite repeated warnings." Sarah couldn't stay quiet anymore. She stood up and cleared her throat. "Excuse me, but I think you're referring to my family, and I'd like to respond to these accusations." The room got very quiet. Maggie's fake smile appeared on her face. "Of course, Sarah. We welcome input from all residents. My daughter and I have been trying our best to follow the community guidelines," Sarah said, keeping her voice calm and professional. "But some of the complaints we've received seem excessive and unreasonable. For instance, we were cited for having a small garden gnome in our yard, but I don't see how that harms anyone or affects property values." A woman in the middle of the room nodded in agreement. "I have garden gnomes too," she said. "I didn't know they weren't allowed." Maggie's smile got tighter. "Mrs. Patterson, your decorative items were approved by the board 3 years ago. We're talking about new installations that haven't gone through the proper approval process." "What's the approval process for a 6-inch gnome?" Sarah asked. "Any decorative item must be submitted to the board in writing with photographs and a detailed description. The board meets once a month to review applications. So if I want to put a small decoration in my own yard, I have to wait a month for permission?" "That's correct. It's the same process everyone follows." Sarah looked around the room and noticed that several people seemed uncomfortable with this explanation. She decided to push a little further. "I'm also curious about the process for documenting violations," she said. "Are board members allowed to take photographs of residents' homes without permission?" Maggie's face got red. "Board members have the right to document compliance issues on HOA property. But my front yard isn't HOA property. It's my private property. Your front yard is visible from the street, which makes it part of the community's visual environment." Sarah realized she wasn't going to win this argument in a public meeting, but she had accomplished something important. Several other residents were now looking uncomfortable with Maggie's explanations, and she could tell that not everyone was happy with how strictly the rules were being enforced. After the meeting, 3 neighbors approached Sarah in the parking lot. "I'm Jennifer Chen," said the woman who had brought them cookies on moving day. "I live next door to you. I wanted to apologize for how you've been treated." "We've been wanting to say something about Maggie's behavior for months," said another woman. "But she's very good at making life difficult for people who oppose her." The third person was Harold, the older man who had asked questions during the meeting. "I've been in this neighborhood for 12 years, he said. "Maggie wasn't always like this, but ever since her husband died 2 years ago, she's gotten more and more controlling. I think being HOA president is the only thing that makes her feel important. Is there anything we can do? Sarah asked. Board elections are in 6 months, Jennifer said. If enough people run against her, we might be able to change things. In the meantime, Harold added, just try to stay under her radar. I know it's frustrating, but she has the power to make your life miserable if she wants to. As Sarah drove home, she thought about Harold's advice. In her job as police chief, she had learned that sometimes the best strategy was to avoid conflict while working quietly to build support for change. Maybe she should just follow the rules, even the ridiculous ones, and wait for the board elections. But when she got home, she found Emma sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop, working on a school project about civil rights. Emma was writing about people who had stood up to unfair treatment, even when it was difficult and dangerous. How was the meeting? Emma asked without looking up from her screen. Interesting, Sarah said. I learned a lot about how the HOA works. Are they going to make us pay those fines? Sarah looked out the window at Mr. Whiskers, still sitting proudly beside their mailbox. She thought about the way Maggie had looked at Emma that first day, like she was some kind of problem that needed to be solved. She thought about the way Maggie had threatened them during her visit, talking about forced sales and legal action. No, Sarah said finally. We're not paying any fines for made-up violations. Emma looked up from her laptop and smiled. Good, because I found something interesting in the HOA rules today. What's that? According to Section 12(4), board members can be removed from office if they abuse their authority or harass residents. And according to Section 12(7), residents have the right to appeal any fines or violations to an independent mediator. Sarah felt a surge of pride in her daughter. Emma had always been smart, but now she was learning to use that intelligence to fight back against unfairness. The first Saturday in September was unusually hot for late summer. Emma had been talking for weeks about setting up a lemonade stand to raise money for her school's drama club trip to New York. Sarah had been hesitant at first, worried about giving Maggie another reason to complain, but Emma had done her research. Look, Mom, Emma said, showing Sarah a printed copy of the HOA rules. Section 15(2) says that residents can't operate commercial businesses from their homes. But it also says that children under 18 can engage in temporary fundraising activities for school or charity purposes, with proper notification to the board. Did you give proper notification?
Sarah asked. Emma held up a typed letter.
I'm putting this in Maggie's mailbox today. It explains that I'm raising money for an educational trip. The stand will only be up for 1 day and I'll clean up completely when I'm done. Sarah read through Emma's letter. It was polite, professional, and referenced the exact HOA rule that allowed the activity. She was impressed by how thoughtfully Emma had prepared. Okay, Sarah said, but if there are any problems, you take the stand down immediately. I don't want this to turn into a bigger conflict. Deal, Emma said, grinning. Early Saturday morning, Emma set up a small card table at the end of their driveway. She had made fresh lemonade using her grandmother's recipe, and she had printed out neat signs explaining that the money was going to fund a school trip. She had even brought a folding chair and a book to read between customers. By 10 a.m., Emma had sold 12 cups of lemonade to neighbors out for morning walks and weekend jogs. The Johnsons from across the street had bought 4 cups and told their friends about. Mrs. Chen had bought 2 cups and given Emma an extra $5 for the cause. Emma was having fun chatting with neighbors she hadn't met before. Most people were friendly and interested in hearing about the drama club's trip to see Broadway shows. Some of the older residents told stories about their own children's school fundraisers from years past. Around 11:30, Emma saw Maggie's silver Mercedes approaching slowly down the street. Maggie parked in her own driveway and walked over to the lemonade stand with her usual clipboard and fake smile. Good morning, Emma, Maggie said in her sweetest voice. What do we have here? I'm raising money for my school drama club, Emma explained politely. We're taking a trip to New York to see some Broadway shows. I left a notification letter in your mailbox yesterday explaining everything. Maggie picked up one of Emma's signs and read it carefully. Then she pulled out her phone and took several pictures of the lemonade stand from different angles. I see, Maggie said. And you believe you have permission to operate this commercial activity? It's not a commercial activity, Emma said, keeping her voice respectful. According to Section 15.2 of the HOA guidelines, Children can do temporary fundraising for school purposes. I'm not making a profit. All the money goes directly to the school. Maggie's smile got thinner. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, dear. That rule applies to things like selling candy bars or gift wrap for school fundraisers. It doesn't apply to setting up unauthorized business operations on HOA property. Emma felt her stomach drop, but she kept her voice steady. I'm not on HOA property. I'm on my family's property at the end of our own driveway. The end of your driveway extends into the community right-of-way, Maggie said, consulting her clipboard. That makes it HOA property. And even if it wasn't, this type of activity creates traffic and noise that affects the entire neighborhood. Emma looked around. There was no traffic. The street was quiet except for a few birds singing in the trees. She had sold lemonade to maybe 15 people in 2 hours, and most of them had been neighbors from their own street who were already out walking. I don't think I'm creating any traffic problems, Emma said carefully. That's not for you to decide, Maggie replied, her voice getting sharper. The HOA board makes those determinations based on community standards and safety considerations. But you didn't even read my notification letter yet. I just put it in your mailbox yesterday. I don't need to read your letter to know that this activity is inappropriate. You need to shut down this operation immediately. Emma felt her face getting hot. She had worked hard to follow the rules exactly. She had researched the HOA guidelines, written a proper notification letter, and been careful to stay on her own property. She had been polite to every customer and kept everything neat and clean. I don't think I'm breaking any rules, Emma said, trying to keep her voice calm. Could you show me exactly which rule says I can't do this? Maggie's fake smile disappeared completely. Young lady, I don't have to explain every rule to you. When an HOA board member tells you to stop an activity, you stop. That's how communities like this work. But if I'm not actually breaking a rule, you are breaking multiple rules. Unauthorized commercial activity, improper use of community right-of-way, creation of traffic hazards, and failure to obtain proper permits. Emma felt tears of frustration building up behind her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of Maggie. What permits? The HOA rules don't mention any permits for fundraising. There are county permits required for any sales activity, even on private property. Did you obtain a business license? A health department permit for food service? Insurance coverage for customers who might be injured on your property? Emma stared at her in shock. It's lemonade. From a powder mix. I'm not running a restaurant. The law doesn't distinguish between different types of food service, Maggie said smugly. If you're selling food or beverages to the public, you need proper permits and health department approval. At that moment, Mrs. Patterson, the woman from the HOA meeting who had mentioned her own garden gnomes, walked up to the lemonade stand. Good morning, girls, she said cheerfully. I'd like 2 cups of lemonade, please. Actually, Mrs. Patterson, Maggie said quickly, Emma's just shutting down. This activity hasn't been properly authorized. Mrs. Patterson looked confused. Authorized? It's a lemonade stand. My granddaughter does the same thing when she visits. The rules apply to everyone equally, Maggie said stiffly. What rules? I've lived here for 8 years and I've never heard of any rules against children's lemonade stands. Emma saw an opportunity. Mrs. Patterson, do you think Section 15.2 of the HOA guidelines covers school fundraising activities? Mrs. Patterson looked at Maggie with raised eyebrows. Are you seriously trying to shut down a child's school fundraiser? I'm enforcing community standards, Maggie replied. Standards that protect all of our property values and ensure compliance with local regulations. This is ridiculous, Mrs. Patterson said. Emma, I'll take 4 cups of lemonade. And here's $20 for your school trip. Mrs. Patterson, I strongly advise you not to participate in this unauthorized activity, Maggie warned. And I strongly advise you to find something better to do with your Saturday morning than harassing a teenager who's trying to raise money for school. Mrs. Patterson shot back. Maggie's face turned red. She pulled out her phone again and started taking more pictures, including some of Mrs. Patterson handing money to Emma. I'm documenting this violation for the board, Maggie announced. Emma, you have 15 minutes to remove all of this equipment and clean up completely. If you don't comply, your family will face immediate fines and potential legal action. For what? Emma asked, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. For operating an illegal business, violating health codes, creating public nuisances, and refusing to comply with lawful HOA directives. Mrs. Patterson shook her head in disgust. Maggie, you're being completely unreasonable. This child is doing nothing wrong. The rules are the rules, Patricia. If we make exceptions for one family, we have to make exceptions for everyone. What about the Johnson boys who washed cars for their basketball team last month? What about the Harper family who sold cookies for Girl Scouts? What about your own nephew who had a garage sale here 3 weeks ago? Maggie looked flustered for the first time. Those are completely different situations. How are they different? They followed proper procedures. What procedures? Emma followed the procedures exactly as written in the HOA guidelines. Maggie clutched her clipboard tighter. I don't have time to argue about this. Emma has 15 minutes to shut down, or her family will face consequences. After Maggie stalked back to her house, Mrs. Patterson helped Emma pack up the lemonade stand. I'm sorry, sweetheart, she said. That woman is out of control. Emma felt defeated. She had raised $43 for the drama club trip, but more than that, she had enjoyed meeting neighbors and talking about her school activities. It had felt like she was finally starting to fit into the community. I don't understand why she hates us so much, Emma said as they folded up the card table. It's not about you, Mrs. Patterson said gently. Maggie has been getting worse ever since her husband died. I think she's lonely and angry, and having power over the HOA is the only thing that makes her feel important anymore. That doesn't make it okay for her to be mean to people. No, it doesn't. And a lot of us are getting tired of her behavior, but she's made it very clear that she'll retaliate against anyone who opposes her. Emma carried the folding chair back to the garage, feeling frustrated, and 2 weeks after the lemonade stand incident, Sarah was having the worst day she'd had since starting her new job. There had been a major accident on the interstate that morning, requiring her to coordinate with state police and emergency services. Then, one of her detectives had called in sick, leaving them short-staffed for a court appearance. By the time she got home at 6 p.m., all she wanted was a quiet evening with Emma and maybe a glass of wine. Instead, she found 3 more HOA violation notices stuck to her front door. The first notice was about their garbage cans, which had apparently been placed improperly on the curb for pickup that morning. According to Maggie's documentation, the cans were supposed to be exactly 3 feet apart and positioned with the handles facing away from the street. Sarah's cans had been 4 feet apart with the handles facing randomly. The second notice was about Emma's bedroom window, which had been opened during quiet hours the previous evening. A neighbor had allegedly complained about hearing loud music and inappropriate language coming from the room. Sarah knew this was impossible because Emma had been at drama club practice until 9 p.m. and had gone straight to bed when she got home. The third notice was the most ridiculous yet. Maggie had apparently seen Emma walking aggressively through the neighborhood that afternoon, creating an atmosphere of hostility and intimidation for other residents. The notice included a grainy photo taken from a distance that showed Emma walking normally down the sidewalk with her school backpack. Sarah crumpled up the notices and threw them in the trash, then immediately pulled them back out. Emma had been right about documenting everything. If this situation ended up in court or before a mediator, they would need evidence of Maggie's increasingly unreasonable behavior. Emma came downstairs as Sarah was making dinner, looking frustrated. Let me guess, Emma said. More violation notices? 3 of them, including one about your alleged aggressive walking. Emma laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Aggressive walking? What does that even mean? According to Maggie, you were creating an atmosphere of intimidation. I was walking home from school. With my backpack! How is that intimidating? Sarah showed Emma the photo. In it, Emma looked like exactly what she was. A teenager walking home from school, maybe moving a little faster than usual because it had been raining. This is getting crazy. Mom, she's following me around taking pictures now. Yesterday I saw her car parked at the end of our street when I was coming home from drama practice. When I waved at her, she drove away really fast. Sarah felt a chill run through her. In her job as police chief, she had dealt with stalking cases before. What Maggie was doing was starting to cross the line from neighborhood harassment into something more serious. Has she approached you directly since the lemonade stand incident? Sarah asked a few times. Always when you're not home. She'll find me in the yard or when I'm walking to the bus stop and tell me about some new rule I'm supposedly breaking. What kind of rules? Emma rolled her eyes. Last week she told me I wasn't allowed to wear band t-shirts because they might have inappropriate language or images. The day before that she said my backpack was too big and it was blocking the sidewalk when I set it down to tie my shoe. Why didn't you tell me about this? Because I knew you'd get upset and want to do something about it. I was trying to handle it myself. Sarah felt a mix of pride and worry. She was proud of Emma for trying to handle the situation maturely, but worried that she was dealing with more than any teenager should have to handle. Em, you don't have to handle this by yourself. That's what I'm here for. I know, but you're already stressed about your new job and I didn't want to make things worse. Sarah hugged her daughter. Your safety and well-being are more important than my job stress. If someone is harassing you, I need to know about it. That Saturday, Sarah decided to wash her car in the driveway. It was a beautiful fall day and the car needed cleaning after a week of rain. She had checked the HOA rules carefully and confirmed that car washing was allowed on private property, as long as soap and water didn't run into storm drains. Emma was helping, mostly by spraying Sarah with the hose and laughing when her mother shrieked at the cold water. They were having fun for the first time in weeks, just enjoying being together without worrying about HOA rules or violation notices. Around noon, Maggie appeared at the edge of their driveway carrying her ever-present clipboard. Good morning, Sarah, Maggie said in her fake sweet voice. I see you're washing your car. Good morning, Maggie, Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice neutral. I wanted to remind you that car washing activities are restricted to garage spaces only. We can't have soap and chemicals running into our storm drainage system. Sarah had been expecting this. She pointed to the biodegradable car soap she was using and the absorbent mats she had placed under the car. I'm using environmentally safe soap and I have mats to catch any runoff. That's wonderful, but the rules are very clear. Section 8.4 states that vehicle maintenance activities should be conducted in enclosed garage spaces to maintain the aesthetic appeal of our neighborhood. Emma looked up from where she was spraying soap off the car's wheels. But Mrs. Patterson washes her car in her driveway all the time, and so do the Johnsons. Maggie's smile tightened. Other residents' activities are not your concern, young lady. Actually, they are my concern, Sarah said calmly. If you're enforcing rules selectively, that's discrimination. Either the rule applies to everyone or it doesn't apply to anyone. I enforce all rules equally and fairly, Maggie replied, but she didn't meet Sarah's eyes when she said it. Then I assume you've issued violation notices to all the other residents who wash their cars in their driveways. Each situation is evaluated individually based on specific circumstances. What specific circumstances make my car washing different from anyone else's? Maggie consulted her clipboard as if looking for an answer. Your activity is creating excessive noise and disturbance. Sarah looked around. They had been talking quietly and playing music at a very low volume. The only noise was the sound of water from the hose, which was no louder than a sprinkler. What noise? Sarah asked. The music and the laughing. It's disruptive to neighbors who are trying to enjoy peaceful Saturday mornings. Emma stared at Maggie in disbelief. You're complaining about laughing? People aren't allowed to laugh in their own yards? Emma, please don't speak to Mrs. Thornton that way, Sarah said, though privately she was thinking the same thing. Young people today have no respect for community standards, Maggie said, looking directly at Emma. When I was growing up, children understood that their behavior reflected on their families and their neighborhoods. Emma's face flushed red, but she kept her voice controlled. I think my behavior reflects very well on my family. I get good grades, I volunteer at school, I help my neighbors when they need it, and I try to be polite even when people are being unreasonable to me. Unreasonable? Maggie's voice rose slightly. I am trying to maintain the standards that make this neighborhood desirable. Standards that protect everyone's property values and quality of life. By following me around taking pictures? By making up rules about how I'm allowed to walk down the street? By threatening my family with fines for having a garden gnome? Sarah put a warning hand on Emma's shoulder, but Emma shrugged it off and continued. You know what would really protect property values? Having neighbors who treat each other with respect and kindness. Having a community where people feel welcome instead of constantly worried about being harassed over made-up violations. Maggie's face was getting redder by the second. Made-up violations? Every citation I've issued is based on legitimate community standards. Then show me the rule that says I can't laugh in my own yard, Emma challenged. Show me the rule that defines aggressive walking. Show me where it says garden gnomes are banned, but only if they haven't been pre-approved by the board. You have 15 minutes to finish this car washing activity and clean up completely. Maggie said, ignoring Emma's questions. If you continue to violate community standards, your family will face escalating fines and potential legal action. As Maggie started to walk away, Emma called after her. Mrs. Thornton, can I ask you something? Maggie turned around, looking suspicious. Why do you hate us so much? We've tried to follow every rule. We've been polite and respectful. We keep our property clean and quiet. What did we do to make you dislike us? For a moment, Maggie's mask of fake politeness slipped, and Sarah saw something raw and angry underneath. You think you're better than everyone else, Maggie said, her voice shaking slightly. You think you can move into our neighborhood and do whatever you want because you're educated and you have important jobs. But this is my community. I've worked for 8 years to build something special here, and I'm not going to let you and your entitled daughter destroy it. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't about HOA rules or community standards. This was personal. Maggie, we don't think we're better than anyone, Sarah said carefully. We just want to live peacefully in our home. Then follow the rules like everyone else, Maggie snapped. Stop questioning my authority and teach your daughter to show proper respect. After Maggie left, Sarah and Emma finished washing the car in tents. 3 days after the car washing incident, Sarah was called to an emergency at the police station and had to stay late to handle a domestic violence case. She called Emma around 5 p.m. to let her know she wouldn't be home until after 7, and reminded her to keep the doors locked and not to answer if anyone came by. Emma was used to being home alone. She made herself a sandwich, did her homework at the kitchen table, and was settling in to watch a movie when she realized she had left her drama club script in her mother's car. The car was parked in the driveway, and Emma knew where Sarah kept the spare key. It was a beautiful October evening, still warm enough to be outside without a jacket. Emma grabbed the car key and headed out to get her script. She needed to practice her lines for the play they were rehearsing, and she had a few hours before her mother got home. She found the script on the passenger seat and was walking back toward the house when she heard her name being called. Emma. Emma, I need to speak with you right now. Emma turned to see Maggie marching across the street toward their driveway. Maggie was wearing a bright red sweater and dark pants, and she was carrying her clipboard along with what looked like a camera. Emma's first instinct was to follow her mother's instructions and go inside immediately. But something about Maggie's tone made her hesitate. The older woman sounded more agitated than usual, almost frantic. Mrs. Thornton, my mom isn't home right now, Emma said, staying near the front door. Maybe you could come back later when she's here. This can't wait, Maggie said, continuing to walk toward Emma. I just received very disturbing information about your family, and I need to address it immediately. Emma felt her stomach drop. What kind of information? I know what your mother does for work, Maggie said, stopping about 10 feet away from Emma. And I know why you really moved to this neighborhood. Emma was confused. I don't understand what you mean. Don't play innocent with me, young lady. I did some research after our conversation on Saturday. Your mother isn't just some office worker, is she? She's a police officer. Emma blinked in surprise. She hadn't realized that her mother's job was a secret, but they had never talked about it with the neighbors. So what if she is? So what? Maggie's voice rose to almost a shout. So what? You've been lying to everyone in this community. You moved here thinking you could intimidate people because your mother has a badge. We haven't been intimidating anyone, Emma said, taking a step back toward the door. And we never lied about anything. Nobody ever asked what my mom does for work. That's exactly what someone would say if they were trying to hide something, Maggie said, moving closer. I should have known there was something wrong with you two from the beginning. The way you act like the rules don't apply to you, the way you question my authority, the way you think you can do whatever you want. Emma reached behind her and touched the door handle, ready to go inside if Maggie got any closer. Mrs. Thornton, I think there's been a misunderstanding. My mom and I have never tried to intimidate anyone or use her job to get special treatment. Liar, Maggie shouted. You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know what's really going on here? Emma was genuinely frightened now. Maggie's face was red and she was breathing heavily. Her hands were shaking as she clutched her clipboard. I don't think you're stupid, Emma said carefully. I think maybe we should wait and talk about this when my mom gets home. No. I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of being polite. I'm tired of watching you and your mother destroy everything I've worked for. Maggie started walking toward Emma again, and Emma turned to open the front door. But as she turned the handle, Maggie grabbed her arm. "Don't you dare walk away from me," Maggie yelled. "I am talking to you." Emma jerked her arm away from Maggie's grip. "Please don't touch me, Mrs. Thornton. I'll touch you if I want to. This is my neighborhood, and you're going to listen to what I have to say." Emma pulled open the front door and started to step inside, but Maggie followed her, actually stepping onto the front porch. "You can't run away from this conversation," Maggie screamed. "You and your mother think you can just ignore me, but you're wrong. I have power in this community. I can make your lives miserable." Emma turned around to face Maggie, trying to stay calm even though her heart was pounding. "Mrs. Thornton, you need to leave our property right now. If you want to talk to my mom, you can call her or come back when she's home. I'm not going anywhere until you admit what you've been doing." "What do you think we've been doing?" "Using your mother's position to threaten people. Making neighbors afraid to complain about your violations because they think she'll arrest them." Emma stared at Maggie in disbelief. "That's crazy. My mom doesn't even work in this county, and we've never threatened anyone. Then why hasn't anyone else complained about your family? Why is it always just me who has to deal with your violations? Maybe because we're not actually violating anything," Emma said, her own frustration finally breaking through her attempts to stay calm. "Maybe because a garden gnome and a lemonade stand aren't actually problems. Maybe because normal people don't spend their time following teenagers around taking pictures and making up complaints." Maggie's face went from red to almost purple. "How dare you speak to me that way? I am an adult. I am the president of this HOA. You will show me respect." "I've been showing you respect for months," Emma shot back. "I've been polite when you were rude. I've listened to your complaints even when they were ridiculous. I've tried to follow your rules even when they didn't make sense. But I'm done being respectful to someone who won't show me the same courtesy." "You little brat," Maggie screamed. "You think you're so smart. You think you can outsmart me with your research and your attitude. But I'll show you who's really in charge here." Maggie reached into her purse and pulled out something small and black. For a split second, Emma thought it might be another camera or maybe pepper spray. Then she realized it was a gun. "You'll learn to respect authority," Maggie shouted, pointing the small pistol directly at Emma's chest. "You'll learn that there are consequences for disrespecting your elders." Emma's training from school safety drills kicked in automatically. She raised her hands slowly, keeping them visible, and took a small step backward. "Mrs. Thornton, please put the gun down," Emma said, trying to keep her voice as calm as possible, even though she felt like she might throw up. "I'm not threatening you. I'm not trying to hurt you. You've been threatening me for months. You and your mother. Acting like you're better than everyone. Questioning my authority. Making me look bad in front of the other residents." "I'm sorry if we made you feel that way," Emma said, still backing slowly toward the open door. "That wasn't our intention." "Liar. Everything you do is intentional. The gnome, the lemonade stand, the car washing, the way you walk, the way you dress, the way you look at me like I'm stupid." Emma could see neighbors starting to come out of their houses, drawn by the shouting. Mrs. Chen was standing in her front yard with her phone in her hand. The Johnson boys were peeking out from behind their parents' car. "Mrs. Thornton, there are people watching," Emma said quietly. "Please put the gun away before someone gets hurt." "Good. Let them watch. Let them see what happens when people don't follow the rules." Emma managed to take another step backward, getting closer to the threshold of the house. If she could get inside and lock the door, she could call 911 and her mother. "I'll follow the rules," Emma said. "Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. Just please put the gun down. You should have thought about that months ago. You should have been respectful from the beginning. You should have taught your mother to show proper appreciation for everything I do for this community." Emma's hand found the door frame behind her. She was almost inside. Just a few more inches and she could slam the door and lock it. "You're right," Emma said, hating herself for the words but knowing she needed to say whatever would keep Maggie from pulling the trigger. "We should have been more appreciative. We should have been more respectful." "Yes. Finally you admit it." Emma took one more step backward, crossing the threshold into the house. But as she started to push the door closed, Maggie lunged forward. "Don't you dare close that door on me," Maggie screamed. Emma slammed the door shut and turned the deadbolt, then ran toward the kitchen where she had left her phone. Behind her, she could hear Maggie pounding on the door and screaming incoherently. With shaking hands, Emma dialed 911. 911. "What's your emergency?" "There's a woman on my front porch with a gun," Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. She was pointing it at me and threatening me. I'm locked in the house now, but she's still outside. Are you injured? No, I'm okay. But she's still out there and she has the gun. What's your address? Emma gave the dispatcher her address and described what had happened. The dispatcher told her to stay on the line and away from windows and doors until officers arrived. Is there an adult with you? The dispatcher asked. No, my mom is at work. But she's a police officer. Her name is Sarah Mitchell and she works for the city police department. We'll contact her right away. Stay on the line with me until help arrives. Emma crouched in the kitchen, listening to Maggie still shouting and banging on the front door. She could hear car doors slamming outside as more neighbors came to see what was happening. Sarah's phone rang while she was finishing paperwork in her office at the police station. When she saw 911 dispatch on the caller ID, her blood went cold. Chief Mitchell, she answered. Chief, this is dispatch. We have officers responding to a domestic disturbance at 1247 Maple Drive. That's your home address? Your daughter called 911 reporting a woman with a gun on the property. Sarah's heart stopped. Is Emma okay? She's safe inside the house and uninjured. Officers are on scene now. The suspect has been detained. Sarah was already grabbing her keys and badge. I'm on my way. The drive to Willowbrook Estates took 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. Sarah's mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. She had known that Maggie was becoming increasingly unstable, but she had never imagined it would escalate to this level. When she pulled into her neighborhood, she could see the flashing lights from 3 blocks away. There were 4 police cars, an ambulance, and what looked like half the neighborhood standing in clusters on the sidewalk, all staring at her house. Sarah parked behind one of the patrol cars and ran toward her front door, showing her badge to the first officer she encountered. Where's my daughter? She asked. Inside with Officer Martinez. She's shaken up but physically unharmed. Sarah pushed through the front door and found Emma sitting on the living room couch with a young female officer. Emma's face was pale, but when she saw her mother, she jumped up and ran into Sarah's arms. Are you okay? Sarah asked, holding Emma tightly. Are you hurt? Did she touch you? I'm okay, Mom. She grabbed my arm once, but that was before she had the gun out. Sarah felt sick. Tell me exactly what happened. Emma recounted the entire incident while Officer Martinez took notes. Sarah listened in growing horror as Emma described Maggie's escalating anger, the physical confrontation, and finally the moment when Maggie had pulled out the gun. You did exactly the right thing, Sarah told Emma when she finished. You stayed calm, you de-escalated when you could, and you got to safety. I'm so proud of how you handled this. Is she arrested? Emma asked. Officer Martinez nodded. She's been taken into custody on charges of aggravated menacing, assault, and brandishing a firearm. There will probably be additional charges once the district attorney reviews the case. Sarah looked out the window and saw neighbors starting to disperse as the police cars prepared to leave. But she also noticed several people talking in small groups, and she could tell they were discussing what had happened. Detective Rodriguez arrived just as the other officers were finishing their reports. Sarah, I came as soon as I heard. How's Emma? Physically fine. Emotionally shaken up, but handling it better than I would be at her age. And how are you handling it? Sarah realized she hadn't really processed her own emotions yet. She had been focused entirely on making sure Emma was okay. Now that the immediate crisis was over, she felt anger building up inside her like a pressure cooker. I want to press every possible charge, she said quietly, so Emma wouldn't hear the fury in her voice. This woman has been stalking and harassing my daughter for months. She put a gun to my child's chest and threatened her life. I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. That's what's going to happen, Mike assured her. The district attorney is already reviewing the case. With multiple witnesses and Emma's 911 call as evidence, this is going to be an easy conviction. An hour later, after all the officers had left and the neighbors had gone back inside, Sarah and Emma sat together on the couch trying to process what had happened. Mom, there's something I need to tell you, Emma said. When she pulled out the gun, she said something about knowing what you do for work. What did she say exactly? She said she did research and found out you're a police officer. She seemed to think we were hiding it on purpose, like we were trying to intimidate people or something. Sarah closed her eyes. She had been careful not to mention her job around the neighbors, not because she was trying to hide it, but because she had learned from experience that some people acted differently around police officers. Some became overly respectful and nervous. Others became hostile and confrontational. Did anyone else hear her say that? Sarah asked. I think so. Mrs. Chen and the Johnsons were outside by then, and she was shouting pretty loudly. Sarah realized that by tomorrow, everyone in the neighborhood would know that she was the new police chief. The thought made her nervous, but not nearly as nervous as the idea that Maggie might have hurt Emma. The next morning, there was a knock on their door at 8 a.m. Sarah opened it to find Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Patterson, Harold from the HOA meeting, and 3 other neighbors she recognized but hadn't met. "We wanted to check on Emma," Mrs. Chen said, "and we wanted to apologize." "Apologize for what?" "For not speaking up sooner," Harold said. "We all knew Maggie was getting out of control. We saw how she was treating your family, and we should have done something about it." "We were afraid," admitted a woman Sarah didn't know. Maggie made it clear that she would retaliate against anyone who opposed her. She's made life difficult for several families over the years. Emma appeared behind Sarah, looking curious about all the visitors. "Emma, honey, we're so sorry about what happened to you," Mrs. Patterson said. "That was terrifying and completely unacceptable." "Thank you," Emma said softly. "We've been talking all morning," Harold said. The HOA board met an emergency session at 7 a.m. Maggie has been removed from all positions effective immediately. "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. "It means she has no authority to issue violations, collect fines, or make decisions about HOA matters," Mrs. Patterson explained. "We're also reviewing every citation she's issued in the past year to make sure they were legitimate." The woman Sarah didn't know stepped forward. "I'm Jennifer Walsh. I live 3 streets over. Maggie has been harassing my family too, just not as severely as she was harassing yours." After what happened yesterday, 6 more families came forward with similar stories. Sarah felt a mixture of validation and frustration. If other families had been dealing with Maggie's harassment, why hadn't anyone said anything sooner? As if reading her mind, Harold spoke up. "We should have acted sooner. We should have supported you when you questioned her behavior at the HOA meeting. We were cowards, and Emma paid the price for our cowardice." "What's going to happen now?" Emma asked. "Now we're going to run this HOA the way it should have been run all along," Mrs. Chen said firmly, "with reasonable rules, fair enforcement, and respect for all residents." After the neighbors left, Sarah found Emma in the kitchen making breakfast. "How are you feeling about everything?" Sarah asked. "Weird," Emma admitted. "I'm glad she's gone, but I keep thinking about how angry she looked when she pointed the gun at me. I've never had someone hate me that much before." "She didn't hate you specifically," Sarah said, sitting down beside Emma. "She hated what you represented to her. You were young, confident, and unafraid to question her authority. That threatened her sense of control." Mrs. Walsh said other families have been dealing with her harassment too. "Do you think she would have eventually pulled a gun on someone else if it hadn't been me?" Sarah considered this. In her experience, people like Maggie usually escalated their behavior until someone stopped them. If it hadn't been Emma, it probably would have been another teenager or an elderly resident or someone else Maggie perceived as vulnerable. "Probably," Sarah said honestly, "which means you may have prevented her from hurting someone else." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't gotten inside the house in time." "But you did get inside. You stayed calm, you used your head, and you protected yourself. That's what matters." That afternoon, Detective Rodriguez called with an update. The district attorney is charging her with aggravated menacing with a deadly weapon, assault, stalking, and harassment, he told Sarah. "With the evidence we have, including multiple witness statements and the 911 recording, she's looking at serious jail time." "What about her gun?" "Legally purchased, and she had a concealed carry permit. But both the gun and the permit have been confiscated. She won't be getting either one back." "When will she get out of jail?" "Her lawyer is trying to get bail, but given the nature of the charges and the fact that she threatened a minor with a deadly weapon, the judge might deny it. Even if she does make bail, she'll have a restraining order that prohibits her from coming within 500 feet of your family or your property." Sarah felt some of the tension in her shoulders relax. Emma would be safe, at least for now. That evening, as Sarah was making dinner, Emma came into the kitchen with a determined look on her face. "Mom, I want to do something." "What kind of something?" "I want to write a letter to the HOA board about what happened. Not just about yesterday, but about all of it. The harassment, the stalking, the way she made me feel unsafe in my own neighborhood." "That's a good idea. It might help them understand how serious the situation really was." I also want to write a letter to the editor of the local newspaper. I think people should know that this kind of behavior isn't okay, and that there are ways to fight back when someone in authority is abusing their power." Sarah looked at her daughter with pride. 3 months ago, Emma had been a normal teenager mainly concerned with school and friends. 6 months after the incident with the gun, Sarah was working in her garden on a warm Saturday morning in April when she heard familiar voices coming down the sidewalk. She looked up to see Emma walking with 3 friends from school, all of them laughing about something on Emma's phone. "Hey, Mom," Emma called out. "We're going to the park to practice for the talent show." "Have fun," Sarah replied, watching as the group of teenagers walked past the spot where Maggie had pointed a gun at her daughter. Emma showed no signs of fear or anxiety as she passed that location, which had been a concern for Sarah in the months following the incident. The neighborhood had changed dramatically since Maggie's arrest. The new HOA board, led by Harold and Mrs. Chen, had revised most of the rules to be more reasonable and fair. They had also established a formal complaint process that required evidence and prevented personal vendettas from turning into harassment campaigns. The trial had taken place in February, 3 months after the incident. Maggie had initially pleaded not guilty, claiming that she had only pulled out the gun to scare Emma and teach her respect. But when faced with multiple witness testimonies, security camera footage from neighboring houses and the recorded 911 call, she had eventually accepted a plea bargain. She was sentenced to 18 months in jail, followed by 2 years of probation. She was also required to pay for Emma's counseling sessions and to complete anger management classes. Most importantly to Sarah, Maggie was prohibited from returning to Willowbrook Estates and had a permanent restraining order preventing her from contacting Emma or Sarah in any way. The legal proceedings had been difficult for Emma, who had to testify about what happened and relive the trauma of that evening. But Emma had handled it with remarkable maturity, speaking clearly and calmly about Maggie's escalating harassment and the fear she had felt when the gun was pointed at her. "She needs help," Emma had said to Sarah after the sentencing. "I hope the counseling and anger management classes actually help her understand why what she did was wrong." Sarah had been amazed by Emma's compassion, even towards someone who had traumatized her. It showed a level of emotional maturity that many adults never achieved. The incident had also brought unexpected positive changes to their lives. Emma's letter to the local newspaper had been published and had sparked a community-wide conversation about HOA overreach and the importance of treating all residents with respect. Several other neighborhoods had contacted Emma, asking for advice about dealing with similar problems. Emma had started a blog called "Know Your Rights: A Teen's Guide to HOA Laws," which had gained thousands of followers. She wrote about housing regulations, tenant rights, and how to research local laws. The blog had even been featured in a national magazine article about youth activism. "I never thought I'd become famous for fighting with the HOA lady," Emma had joked when the magazine article came out. Sarah was proud of how Emma had turned a traumatic experience into something positive that could help other people. But she was even more proud of how Emma had healed from the trauma itself. The counseling sessions had helped Emma process her feelings about the incident and develop coping strategies for dealing with anxiety and fear. Emma had initially been reluctant to talk to a therapist, but had eventually found it helpful to have someone outside the situation to talk to about her experiences. "I learned that what happened wasn't my fault," Emma had told Sarah after one of her sessions. "I keep thinking that maybe if I had been more polite or if we had just followed all her rules, it wouldn't have escalated like that. But Dr. Martinez helped me understand that nothing I did justified her threatening me with a gun." The neighborhood itself had become a much friendlier place. Without Maggie's constant complaints and threats, residents felt more comfortable getting to know each other and participating in community activities. The HOA had organized several neighborhood events, including a summer barbecue and a holiday light contest that actually encouraged creativity instead of conformity. Emma had made friends with several other teenagers in the neighborhood, including the Johnson twins and a girl named Ashley, whose family had moved in shortly after Maggie's arrest. They often hung out at each other's houses and had formed a study group for their AP classes. "It's funny," Emma had said recently. "This place feels like a real neighborhood now instead of just a collection of houses with a bunch of rules." Sarah had also benefited from the changes. Her job as police chief had become less stressful once she wasn't constantly worried about coming home to new HOA violation notices. She had gotten involved in the Neighborhood Watch program and had helped several neighbors understand their rights regarding HOA regulations and local housing laws. The incident had also brought her closer to several neighbors, who had become genuine friends. Mrs. Chen regularly invited Sarah and Emma over for dinner, and Harold had become a mentor figure for Emma, helping her with her college applications and scholarship essays. "Your daughter has a bright future ahead of her," Harold had told Sarah recently. This experience taught her lessons about standing up for herself and fighting injustice that will serve her well in whatever career she chooses. Emma was considering studying law or journalism in college. Inspired by her experience with researching regulations and advocating for fair treatment, several universities had already expressed interest in her application, particularly after reading her essay about the HOA incident and what she had learned from it. But perhaps the most important change was in Emma herself. She had always been a confident and independent teenager, but the experience had given her a deeper understanding of her own strength and resilience. "I'm not afraid of bullies anymore," Emma had told Sarah. "I know that most of them are just scared people who feel powerless, so they try to control others to make themselves feel better. And I know that there are always ways to fight back if you're willing to do the research and stand up for what's right." This Saturday morning, as Sarah watched Emma walk to the park with her friends, she reflected on how much their lives had improved since that terrible evening in October. They had faced a serious threat and had come through it stronger and more connected to their community than before. Emma's friends were discussing their plans for after graduation, and Sarah could hear Emma talking about her college applications and her ideas for expanding her blog into a nonprofit organization that would help young people understand their rights as residents and tenants. As the group disappeared around the corner toward the park, Sarah went back to her gardening. She was planting new flowers in the bed beside their front steps, next to where Mr. Whiskers still sat proudly by the front door. The little garden gnome had become a symbol of their refusal to be bullied or intimidated. Mrs. Chen came over from next door, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing gardening gloves. "The tulips are looking beautiful this year," she said, admiring Sarah's work. "Emma picked them out," Sarah replied. "She said she wanted flowers that would come back every year to show that we're here to stay." "I'm glad you are. This neighborhood is so much better with families like yours living here." As they worked in their gardens side by side, Sarah thought about the conversation she'd had with Emma the night before. Emma had been helping her make dinner when she had suddenly become serious. "Mom, I want to thank you for something," Emma had said. "What's that?" "For teaching me to stand up for myself, but also for teaching me to do it the right way. When Maggie was harassing us, I could have gotten angry and fought back with insults or pranks. But you showed me how to use research and legal processes and community support instead." Sarah had felt tears in her eyes as Emma continued. "I learned that fighting back doesn't mean being mean or vengeful. It means using the tools that are available to create real change. And I learned that even when someone is being horrible to you, you can still treat them with dignity while protecting yourself." "You figured out most of that on your own," Sarah had replied. "I just tried to support you. You did more than support me. You showed me that we didn't have to be victims just because someone with authority was treating us unfairly. And you showed me that sometimes the best way to help yourself is to help other people who are in similar situations." Now, as Sarah planted flowers in the warm spring sunshine, she felt grateful for the lessons they had both learned from their difficult experience. They had discovered that their new neighborhood could truly become a home, that they were stronger than they had realized, and that standing up for what's right often leads to positive changes that benefit everyone. Emma returned from the park that afternoon full of excitement about the talent show and her plans for the summer. She had been accepted to a journalism camp at the state university, and she was working on a proposal to present her research about HOA regulations at a national conference on housing rights. "I never would have imagined any of this a year ago," Emma said as she helped Sarah make dinner. "I thought the worst thing that could happen was that we'd have to move again. Instead, we found our place," Sarah said. "And you found your voice." "We both did," Emma replied. "And we learned that home isn't just a house or a neighborhood. It's a place where you feel safe to be yourself and strong enough to stand up for what you believe in."